Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, today's class we want to look at solving simultaneous equation. Now, the basic thing about before we look at solving simultaneous equation, we need to first examine what an equation is. Now, from the word itself, equation, it really means to compare, to equate. We also need to understand that for an equation to exist, there are three important things that characterize an equation. One of them is, first of all, for an equation, there has to be an existence of an equal sign. Existence of equal sign. That is one thing that characterizes an equation. Equation, equal. There must be an equal sign. Now, secondly, is that for an equation, there must also be an existence of a variable. An existence of what? Of a variable. By variable in this sense, I mean normal letters, either Greek or normal alphabet. It can be X, Y, or any alphabet. This is the variable we seek to solve for in an equation. And the last thing that tells us about an equation is the existence of the two sides. We must have a left-hand side that is equal to a right-hand side. So the three things, once again, let me quickly recap, that characterize an equation is: one, there has to be an existence of an equal sign. Secondly, there must be an existence of a variable, say X, Y, any alphabet, any variable that we seek to solve in an equation. And thirdly, and lastly, there must be an existence of a left-hand side that is equal to a right-hand side. Now let's look at a very simple linear equation. By linear equation, now we also need to understand that equation can come in very different degree. We can have, and basically equation is defined by, or let me say equation is named based on their variable. When you can have a linear equation, it means the degree of x is, or the degree of the variable is 1. Say for instance, a linear equation, let's say we have 2x minus 3 equals 5. This is linear. Why is it linear? The degree of x is what? Is 1. This is why it is linear. We can have it to be quadratic. Still the degree of x, still we have just one variable. But the degree of x will now be 2. So we have x squared minus 5x plus 6. In this case, equals 0. In this case, we call it quadratic. Quadratic. Because the highest degree of x in this case is what? Is 2. We can have cubic. By cubic, the highest degree of x is what? Is now what? Is 3. We can also have biquadratic. Highest degree of x is what? Is 4. But we're not going into all to that. So it means that we can define an equation by the degree of the variable. But in this case, it's just still one variable. Now we can also define an equation based on the number of variables. For instance, if we have more than one variable in an equation, let's say we now have two variables. Let's say we have 2x minus y, 2x minus y, and let's say we have 3x plus 2y equals something we'll determine now. In this case now, we now have two different variables, x and y. And you call such an equation, you call it simultaneous equation. From the word itself, when you say a simultaneous event, it means two events that are happening at the same time. Now, but we must importantly note that for you to solve a simultaneous equation, in two variables, you need two different equations. You cannot, one equation will not be enough to solve a simultaneous equation. So it means the solvability depends on the number of equations, which is also dependent on the number of variables. So importantly, we should note here again that for a simultaneous equation, we need two equations, and it is an equation in two variables. Now, if we now seek to solve this equation, what do we basically do? Now let's try and let's form an equation. Let's say we want an equation we have where x equals to 1 and where y, let's x equals to 2 and where y equals to 1. Now based on what we have here, if we say 2 times 2, that's 4, 4 minus 1, this should be 3. 3 times x is 6 times 2 is 6 plus 2, that would be 8. Now let's assume we don't know what the answers are. We now seek to solve them. There are a lot of ways to solve a simultaneous equation. I'll tell us a few, then we'll basically look at the simplest and more interesting one. And at times, the nature of the equation will determine which method will be most suitable. What are the methods to solve a simultaneous equation? The methods are: 1, we can use substitution method. You can solve by substitution. You can solve by substitution. You can solve by elimination. You eliminate one variable by basically rearranging the equation. Also, you can solve it graphically. Also, you can solve it by determinant method. You can form it into a matrix and solve it by determinant method. We have a lot of them using either Cramer's or Saru's rule. A lot of them. The beautiful thing is that you can use all these methods to solve all types of equations, basically. But the important thing is, for every equation you have, you must know the easiest one to use that will appropriately give you the answer. Now, one basic thing we need to know in solving mathematics is there are, of course, several methods. There are many ways of killing a rat. The important thing is that the rat has to be killed. Whichever way you approach it, the important thing is that make sure you solve it. Somebody might decide to use substitution, another person might decide to use elimination. It doesn't really matter. The important thing is to solve the problem. Now this problem, let's look at, interestingly, basically solving by substitution method, because I think it's easier. Okay, now once again, let's just note that in solving this problem, we can use 4 different methods. What are the methods again? One of them, substitution, elimination, graphical method. You can use solve by determinant. There are a lot of other ones, but these are the basic ones that we need to understand. Once again, let me recap. I've mentioned also that for a simultaneous equation, you need 2 equations. It's an equation defined when you have the number of variables to be 2. Now, how do you go about solving using substitution method? Let's use substitution method. Now, what do we do in substitution? Basically, what we do in substitution is we will take one of the variable and make it subject to the formula. How do we do that? We'll make sure we'll decide in our mind whether you want to make x a subject or you want to make y a subject. You have to decide that in your mind. It doesn't really matter which you do, but at times the way the equation comes, you will know which is easier to easily make a subject. By making a subject of the formula, it means that one variable has to sit on one side of the equation. For instance, this is equation 1, this is equation 2. From equation 1, I can easily make y the subject of the formula. How do I do that? I can easily make y on one side. So what do? I can say 2x minus 3. Now, importantly, you must know that the moment a number jumps an equal sign, it changes sign. And for numbers that you don't have a sign them, it is assumed that there's an invisible plus. So the moment it jumps the equal sign, it becomes a minus. 2x minus 3 equals y. And note, importantly, in an equation, if you have a equals b, it means it also implies that b equals to a. So what does that tell us? It tells us that 2x minus 3 equals to y is simply the same thing as y equals to 2x minus 3. You can call this another equation, though in actual fact it's not really a different equation. Now we have made y a subject, and we have called it equation 3. We now make this subject and put it into the second equation. Now we have to understand what is the motive. The motive in this approach is that we want to reduce it to a linear equation. What do I say? Linear equation, because equations is solvable when it is linear. That is the simplest form. So what do? So what we now have to do is we now take the second equation. We have 3x plus, instead of having y, we now substitute by 2x minus 3 equals 8. Then we'll start performing normal algebraic operations, basic algebraic operations of you expand the brackets, collect like terms, and what have you. So what do we first of all have to do? Of course, we have to expand this bracket. So we have 3x. If you expand this bracket, what do you have? 2 times 2x, that will give us 4x. Then the same 2 also multiplied by minus 3, that will be minus 6 equals what? 8. Then let's simply collect like terms. By like terms, the terms in x on one side, the terms that are not x on another side. So what do you have? 3x plus 4x. Then we'll take 6 to the other side. You cross the bridge, the equal sign. We have 8 plus 6. So we have 7x equals what? 14. Then what do we do next? What we do next is we divide both sides by 7 because we want to solve for x. And x is attached to 7, so we have to get rid of 7. It's attached to it by multiplication. So to get rid of multiplication, we have to divide. So 7x over 7 equals to 14 over 7. X equals 14 over 7, of course, is 2. Can you see? We're getting back to where we're coming from. Now, having gotten x, then of course it's easy to get y, because we have make y a subject in equation 3. So we can just simply get y. From equation 3, we have it that y will be equal to 2x minus 3. So that will simply be 2 multiplied by 2 minus 3. And that will be 4. 2 times 2 is 4 minus 3. Y will be equal to 1. So at the end of the day, we have been able to solve this simple simultaneous equation. Now, let me quickly summarize all we have done in today's class. Importantly, we need to know that an equation must have an equal sign. It must have a variable that we seek to solve. We have an equation of various forms depending on the degree of the variable and also depending on the number of variables. On the degree of variable, we can have it to be linear, quadratic. We can have it to be cubic. We can have it to be biquadratic, as I've explained in today's class. Then the business of the day to solve the simultaneous equation is an equation defined by a number of variables. The number of variables is 2. We have simultaneous, just like simultaneous events. Simultaneous equation, two equation, that we seek to solve for the two variables. And I said again, solvability for the equation to be solved, it demands that if the number of variables is 2, we will need 2 equations to solve it. And having given an example of an equation, we have several methods to solve it. I listed them. Can anyone remind us of the? Okay, I said we have substitution, elimination, graphical method, determinant. These are some of the methods. And also importantly is that we have choose substitution to solve this problem because it's easier to solve with substitution. So what I'll do is we'll basically make one variable the subject of the formula, and we'll substitute in the second equation, and that makes the equation reduced to a linear form that is then solvable. Now I think with what we have explained so far, if anyone has any question or any area that is not clear, please you can ask your question so that we shed more light on any bottlenecks or any area. But less important, math is beautiful, math is simple, and math is very easy to work with. And basically, let's know that for you to be a very good student of math, you need to solve more problems and need to practice very well. Practice, they say, makes perfection. So inshallah, we'll stop here for today. We'll meet another time where we'll continue from where we stop. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.